Hello and welcome to the vetting process. I have a very special guest with us here today, Sonia Chang-Diaz, a state senator and candidate for governor of Massachusetts. It is amazing to have you here.
Thanks for having me, Joshua. It's good to be with you.
Yep. Why don't you start by telling us a bit about yourself?
Well, let's see. As you mentioned, right, I am a current state senator representing the 2nd Suffolk District in Boston. I'm also a candidate for governor. And really, I come to that work in some fundamental ways, right? As a mom, as a former public school teacher, particularly when, as a candidate, right? I come to that as a 12-year veteran of getting policy accomplished on Beacon Hill. And really, fundamentally, I come to it as a grassroots organizer by heart and by training. And this campaign is really built on the same principles that my policy work has been built on over the past 12 years. I'm in this race to make our core systems in our state, right? Whether it's our housing system, our transportation system, our education system, our criminal legal system, work for working families, right? And for too many years, Beacon Hill has asked or told working families to wait for the kind of change and the relief that they need, and said, we're going to nibble around the edges, maybe we'll put a little Band-Aid here. And what I hear from places, both in my current district and across the state, is that folks are really fed up with being asked to wait in that way. And, their kids can't wait. And, their college debt is mounting, and, medical bills are mounting and causing families to have to, consider, what moving from communities that they've had roots in for generations, or moving out of state because it's just too dang hard to live in Massachusetts, work here, raise kids here anymore. So that is certainly informed my policy work over the last 12 years, but it is especially informing why I'm in this race, which is really to tackle those problems at their core, and put in place solutions that really meet the moment, right? And that are at the scale of the problems that we face.
Absolutely. And let's talk a bit about education here. So MCAS and other standardized testing have perpetuated throughout the pandemic, seemingly. And that's led to this huge debate about whether, like, with the state of education and with the state of the pandemic, whether we should be having such standardized testing, which is ignoring the overall debate about the benefits and downsides of MCAS. So what have been your thoughts as the situation develops of this continuation of MCAS?
Mm-hmm. Well, I would sort of zoom out and take a broader view on this. I think there are so many things that we need to get right in our K through 12 system, as well, for that matter, as our early education system and our higher education system. Our policy around testing is one facet of the policy that we need to get right. There's no one silver bullet, right, that's going to make everything work on its own. We need to get a few things right, but fortunately in Massachusetts, we know how to walk and chew gum at the same time. We can fix multiple things at the same time. And we really, we are a state that is able to, that we have shown over the years that we can do really big things. So when it comes to our K through 12 system, I think that, and particularly with respect to testing, the North Star for me is, like my children are 6 years old and 8 years old. So they are at the, near the beginning of their journey in public schools. I want schools that are going to prepare my kids for success in the 21st century, right? Success in the workforce and success as critical thinkers, as citizens, of this world and of this country. There's only so far you can get on standardized tests, and when it comes to 21st century skills, really, what's at the core of that is critical thinking, right? Ability to work with those who are, don't necessarily look like you or come from the same background as you, creativity, STEM and STEAM skills. Some of those you can test, right? When it comes to, sort of fundamental, math, language arts, things like that. But there's a whole range of skills beyond that I want my kids to have, and I want every other kid in this Commonwealth, to walk out of the 12th grade with. And so we need to have, a more holistic assessment system. And I know the word assessment system has sort of become like a boogeyman, but I mean it in the sort of lowercase a, lowercase s, right? Sort of how are we making sure that our kids are learning the things that they need in order to succeed in this world in the 21st century? So one of the things that I've been a big supporter of over the years in the legislature is a line item in the state budget that funds the Massachusetts Consortium for Innovation in Educational Assessment, the MCIEA. And this is an organization that's working with a handful of school districts around the state to pilot, what would a more holistic assessment system look like, right? In which standardized tests are one of many assessment tools, right? Including surveys and long form response and professional assessment by educators. So that is work that I think is really important to getting this right, because we can't say, scrap our current system with nothing else to replace it with, right? We do need a way to say, as a parent, I want a way to say, okay, is this school achieving success before I choose to send my kids there? Or before I choose to go back, for another year and another year and another year. And so we do need to have those systems in place. And so I'm glad, this is why I push in the budget every year for us to invest those dollars now in the sort of R&D that it is going to take to build a new system, because we've got to have something else to put in its place.
Absolutely. And so as a teenager who's been civically engaged since around 2016, a sentence I have heard all too often when I'm talking about civic engagement and all that, along with my peers, a sentence I've heard, it's a pet peeve of mine. I've heard it all the time. I'm too young to be engaged in politics. I'm too young to care about this issue or that issue. And so both as a legislator and in the event that you became governor, what would you do differently in order to encourage youth civic engagement and to get young people involved in the process?
Yeah, I gotta say, Joshua, I'm so glad you're out there pushing back against those kind of statements whenever you hear them. I'm out there doing the same, right? As a former 8th grade social studies teacher, as a policymaker, as a parent, and you're right? That is flat out wrong. And I tell a very personal story here. And to answer your question directly, right? There's things that I can and will do as governor, but no one should be waiting until they hold any political office in order to do this work. And so I, will not wait until I'm governor, and I haven't. The story that I always tell about this that I think is so illustrative is that my first election that I won in 2008, I won by 213 votes. And if you spread those votes across, actually, you don't even have to spread them across the precincts, although it comes out to about 2 or 3 votes per precinct. So it's really not a lot. But 213 votes. I had 2 young men who were interns on my campaign that year who were not even old enough to vote. They were in 10th grade. But they worked the phones and they worked the doors for a summer on my campaign. And there is not a shadow of a doubt in my mind that those 2 young men earned 213 votes for me. I owe my whole, start of my career in electoral office to 2 young people who were too young to vote. But they changed the course, of history. I became the first Latina elected to the state Senate in that election. So they changed the trajectory for our district, and they changed the trajectory certainly of my career, and broke through a new barrier for Massachusetts. So there's no reason to wait. Whether it's getting pre-registered to vote, if you're a 16 or 17-year-old, you can go ahead and fill out the form, get it into the system, and it goes into effect on your 18th birthday. Volunteering on campaigns, like those 2 young men did, advocating to your government, right? I've never gotten an email or a call from a resident of my district that said, Senator Chang-Diaz, please sponsor this bill or vote against that bill, where anyone from my office said, and how old are you, to decide, do we really want to listen to what you have to say, right? We sweat what every resident of my district thinks and believes in. So there's no reason to wait to get involved.
Absolutely. And just as one last overall question here before we move on to the next short segment I have. So you are running for governor in the primary with 2 or 3 other major candidates. And so it's an interesting race that everyone's kind of watching and keeping an eye on. So I was just curious if you could shed some light on what you think differentiates you in the field. What makes you stand out amongst the other candidates you're running against?
Yeah, for sure. Good question. So I would say my best answer to that is the expression past is prologue, right? People always get, sort of frustrated and disillusioned with, with politicians and feel like politicians are all talk, right, and no action. I don't think that's true of all politicians, right? I've, been in this work and I've seen a lot of people who are good folks working hard to do the right thing, but I know that's a frustration. And so I always tell people, like, I want to talk to you, but ultimately don't take my word for it. Judge me by my actions, and judge all of the candidates, right, by our actions and our records. And if you really want to see what you can expect from me in office, look at my 12-year record in the legislature. There, and whether it's education, funding reform, getting $1.5 billion with a B secured for our K through 12 education system. That was a fight that people said was impossible, right? When we started that back in 2015, 2016, people said, that's pie in the sky, that'll never happen. But we built a movement across the state that made it impossible for Beacon Hill to ignore the interests of working families and their kids, and we got it done. Criminal justice reform in 2018, transgender equal rights in 2016, police reform last year. These are things that I don't just talk about. I've been able to build the winning coalitions to put it in the end zone, right, and actually achieve results on these things. And ultimately, I think that's what every family, every voter wants, is somebody that they can trust to not just talk about it, but get it done.
Absolutely. And now we're going to move on to sort of a lightning round. So I have a few issues here, just a few general issues. And in around 2 sentences or less, I want to get some just quick thoughts on them.
Okay.
So issue number 1, climate change / the Green New Deal.
Existential threat of our time. Huge supporter of the Green New Deal. I'm actually sponsoring an amendment in the ARPA debate for federal funds that is Green New Deal inspired. Like I think we filed it today.
Issue number 2, abortion rights.
I am, strong supporter of the standard of Roe versus Wade. Was proud to vote for the Roe Act. This is one of the clear differences between myself and our current governor, Charlie Baker, who refused to sign the Roe Act here in Massachusetts.
Issue number 3, sanctuary cities.
Similarly, I've been a long-time strong supporter of what in Massachusetts we call the Safe Communities Act. So it's not exactly the same as sanctuary cities, but what it says is that we're not going to use our state and local law enforcement dollars to be enforcing federal immigration detainers.
Next issue, policing reform.
I would direct folks' attention to the police reform bill that I was one of the primary architects of last year in the wake of the murder of George Floyd. That helped to write that bill and shepherd it through to passage through some pretty rocky waters in a very short amount of time.
Mm-hmm. Next issue, Medicare for all.
Support it. Big supporter.
And final issue, possibly the hardest one yet. Which flavor of ice cream is the best?
Oh, that's the most controversial. This is my hand to God, not a politician answer. I have yet to find a flavor of ice cream that I don't love. Like my favorite flavor of ice cream is ice cream.
Amazing answer. And that's all I have for you. Thank you so much for coming on and answering the few quick questions. This was great.
Thank you very much, Joshua.